And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents here on Amazon Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again. I also want to welcome those who are tuning in on Facebook, on YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Glad you all could join us as well. I'm excited about today's guest. He's someone I've had a chance to interview since this book came out, the book Cheeseland. We're talking about Randy Richardson today. He's celebrating a brand new book that's already an Amazon bestseller. It's called Havana Hangover. For you guys joining us on the Amazon Live side, you guys will see a carousel either here on this corner or down below, depending if you're watching on your desktop, laptop, or your mobile device. We actually have the book featured now, but because it is a Kindle reading month, we have all of Randy's books in the carousel. So you guys will see Havana Hangover there. You see Lost in the Ivy. I'm going to highlight that one for you guys there. And then, of course, Cheeseland, the one I just held up there. You can see all of those are available on Kindle. We'll remind you of that a little bit later. But Randy, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be back after all these years.
It is. And Randy, so let's talk about that because one thing about a book by Randy Richardson, and I knew it before I even got into Havana Hangover, regardless of what the title's going to be. I know Chicago is going to make an appearance. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, Randy. But what has this experience been like for you to craft these stories and to see the way that readers are responding to them?
Every time you put out your words into the world, you just never know what kind of a reaction you're going to get, and it always creates more than a little bit of anxiety. But it's been a very, very nice surprise, the reaction that I've gotten to Havana Hangover so far. So far, at least, the response has been extremely positive. I, do you mind if I share one particular story?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
When I was looking for advance blurbs, those little, reviews that you see on the back of your book, I reached out to this author that I've been a fan of for many, many years. And I had met her, probably about the same time that I first met you. And it was at the Printers Row Book Fair in Chicago, which is a huge outdoor book festival. And but she's her name is Catherine Lanigan, and most people don't really know her by her name, but by her pseudonym, which was Joan Wilder. And so she was the author of Romancing the Stone and Jewel of the Nile, which later became these huge motion pictures with Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner.
Yeah.
So, I actually have like an original copy of her Romancing the
Oh,
Stone.
wow. Wow.
And so I've been like a huge fan of hers, and I've always wanted to have her blurb one of my books, but I was always too nervous to do it. And I got up the nerve thinking that maybe this would be a good fit for her because I know she writes these adventure stories that are, in these sort of foreign countries. And so I just thought that maybe she'd have a good reaction to it. But, I just never, you never know how people are going to react to it. And so I waited and waited after I first got the response when she said that she would do it. And I kept thinking, oh God, she doesn't like it. She must not like it. And then I get this email, which is probably like the greatest email that I've ever gotten in my entire life. She writes, and she said, by the way, I had to get her. I wanted to make sure that I had her permission to read this before I read it publicly. And she said, yes, go right ahead. And she said, I've been driving from Indiana to Florida to Texas and now in South Padre Island, Texas, where Mexico is a stone's throw away. However, your fascinating novel has kept me spellbound. And then she wrote, you can quote me on that. And she says, yours is some of the best writing I've read in years. I was beginning to think that no one had any creativity left. And then she went on to write the blurb. And I literally tears were coming down my face when I saw that. So that, I could have stopped right there and I would have been happy with the reactions that I got to this book.
Randy, but she hits on something that's really interesting. I'm so glad you shared that. Thank you for that. Because the thing about Randy and Randy and I have only met each other in person. This is actually our first on-camera interview outside of the one time we met in person.
Right.
In Chicago, actually. My only trip I've been to Chicago. But what has been so interesting for me since Cheeseland, since the very first book that I read of yours, is that you do have a way of being able to tell a story that really does draws the reader in. And she definitely recognized that with Havana Hangover. When did you recognize that gift for yourself, Randy?
I don't know if I've ever fully recognized it myself. You write these stories and you hope that people are going to react positively to them. And I every time that I write a story, like I just literally I have no idea how people are going to respond to them. I write the stories that I like to tell. As you know, like all of my stories are inspired by real life events from my past, and that is part of it. I like to kind of take these little nuggets from my past and just turn things just that little bit and see how things could have gone differently in so many different ways and see where it takes me. And so that to me is the fun part of writing these stories that I write, is that I get to sort of relive these parts of my life, some that were good, some that were bad.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting to see how they go.
And I think that again is part of the interesting thing I mentioned to you before we went on here with Havana Hangover, and I'll be writing my review. The reviews are already coming in, as I mentioned, already an Amazon bestseller, and definitely invite our audience go ahead and click it on the Amazon side to be able to get it for yourself. The Kindle edition is available right now. I think the thing is, Randy, that you bring us into your life, but you also help us to better even look at our own lives. And with a book like Cheeseland or Havana Hangover, we're able to see these characters kind of coming into themselves, but also learning what they're able to do, what they're capable of doing. It definitely
Right.
comes through in Cheeseland, but also in Havana Hangover. Is that something you know going in, or is that something that just kind of evolves as the story evolves for you?
I think to some degree it's a reflection of me.
Okay.
like but like I like to see how the characters grow throughout the story. In Cheeseland it was over a 30-year period. This is over a 5-year period. And the protagonist in this story has he's in kind of a bad way when the story starts, and he ends up taking this trip with the person who sort of started things in a bad spiral for him, in a kind of a way to see if he can bring back his old self and sort of try to capture who he used to be and to maybe heal from the things that hurt him in the past.
And I think too, it's so interesting. You meet someone like in Havana Hangover. Our audience will see as they read it with Tanner. Someone who on the outside, Randy, looks like they have it all together. That's another thing you're able to do very well in your books is that you take us into these characters that seem like they're either confident or strong or have this certain persona about themselves. But we're able to see because of the way you write it, the vulnerabilities that are there, the insecurities that are there, but also the weaknesses that they try hard to disguise. Talk to us about Tanner. How did Tanner come about for you?
So, I mean, as you probably can tell, I mean, Tanner is to some extent inspired by me. I mean, he's a lawyer, which in my day job, that's also what I am. And his character went to law school with the other character, and it was his best friend. They were best friends in law school, and so when he started law school, he always felt like he wasn't as good as anybody else, but he managed to make his way through law school despite that because he worked harder than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But then he becomes friends with this character, um, and he thinks that things are going in a positive direction. He's got this unbelievably great girlfriend, and then things take a very bad turn for him, and his life really, like the end of his law school, the last year was just a very depressing, anxiety-ridden experience, and he basically when he started his, when he starts the story, he's been working in a corporate law firm, making a lot of money in downtown Chicago, but he hates his job. He's never been happy doing anything that he does. And he's basically been doing nothing but working, and he just isn't happy. I mean, he just doesn't. He knows that he's lost himself, and he doesn't know how to get it back. And then he gets this text message from this person who he used to be friends with, inviting him to go down to Cuba, which they had talked about all, when they were friends in law school. And that is the invitation that he takes as a way to maybe see if he can heal from the past and, confront his friend about the things that happened between them.
Wow. And again, there's just so many different layers to this we want to get into. Randy, I want to say for those who are just tuning in, either on the Amazon Live side, welcome to you guys, but also just tuning on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. If you guys have any questions, I see you guys over there on YouTube. If you guys have any questions or comments for Randy, make sure you guys put it in the comment section. The comment section is open on all the sites except for Twitter. For Twitter, of course, you guys can be able to share from there. We'll be able to see that after the fact. But I also want to remind you guys on the Amazon Live side, you guys will see the books either here on the side or down below. You can be able to click on them and enjoy them right on your tablet or your phone, especially because it is Kindle Reading Month or e-reading month as well. So I want to talk about Chicago because you referenced it there. I mentioned about Chicago being a character. No matter what book people have read of yours, Randy, Chicago is going to show up. Of course, we hear about authors writing what you know. Of course, you know the city of Chicago. But I want to ask you this. What has it been like for you to show the different aspects of the city from book to book? Because they are set in different times. What's it been like for you to kind of have the character of Chicago also changing from book to book?
Well, I mean, to some degree, that's each book. I mean, in a large degree, each book reflects a different a period of my life. And so each time that I go back and write about Chicago and my experiences there, I'm sort of reliving that period of my life. And, like any city that you're growing up in, I think, or any place that you're growing up in, how you react to it depends on how old you are, what kind of relationships you're in. And all of that somehow, I mean, to some large degree comes out. And I think, at least I hope, in the stories that I tell and the way that I describe it, because I think it is a completely different city each time I write about it. And that's how I view it.
And I think it definitely does. So one thing about Tanner and the journey we see, I do want to ask you, for those who have not read your work before, Randy, first person is something that you have been able to explore with these books, especially with Havana Hangover, seeing how we're seeing the evolution of the main character. It's fascinating to kind of do. What was it like for you to slip into that skin and to be able to experience the world the way that they were?
Yeah, so I mean, I first wrote in the first person when I wrote Cheeseland. And when I started this book, I felt so close to the protagonist that I thought that the only way that I could make him real was to write him in the first person. And it sometimes that made it more of a challenge because you can't explain everything that's going around because it's only the things that are seen through his eyes.
Right.
But it also, I think, made it more vivid because you were seeing everything through his eyes. I hope that, like, you always, like, I think every time that you are writing a novel, you wonder, like, is this the right way to write this? And like, I always question, and I probably went back and forth whether I should be writing this in the third person or the first person. And usually it would depend on where I get stuck. If you get stuck and you go, oh God, this would be so much better in the third person, and you keep questioning yourself. But I really kind of felt like this had to be a first person story because it was his story, and it's about his growth and how he changes throughout the story, and how that comes to the conclusion of the story, where he is, I think, a completely different person than the person that started the story.
I think as we see, and I'll talk around this, Randy. One of the things that you do from book to book, I notice as a theme, the idea of family, friendship, and also a bit of faith too comes through in these books. We see that in Havana Hangover in an interesting way in conversations that Tanner has. And I love the fact that you're able to kind of get us to kind of think about things that maybe we ourselves have thought. I thought about that one conversation that was had about the American dream, how there'll be so many people reading that will think, you know what, maybe that doesn't work the same way for everyone as it does for others. I think there is also a epiphany for Tanner, and I'm curious as to your thoughts about this, if this was intended or what you thought as the author, of him realizing that the opportunities that he's had and the way he's treated those opportunities, maybe the appreciation wasn't always there for what he had and what he experienced until he experienced some of the things that we see in the book. Was that something that came through as you were writing it, or was it just something that was almost just an extra thing that readers are able to enjoy that comes from the book?
I mean, to some degree, there are things that I thought about from the beginning, but also there are parts of it that grew as the character grew. I mean, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I mean, it is a big part of it. I mean, and the friend who is the antagonist in this story and him grew up in completely different lifestyles. He grew up in a very Midwestern, um, you know, blue collar kind of a lifestyle, while this friend that he becomes friends with is from a very wealthy family, has had just about everything handed to him on a silver platter and all this kind of stuff. And so I don't think that he even thought about any of those issues until he became friends with this character, and saw how it affected this other character, and brought it back to like how he saw his own life and how he grew up, and not fully appreciating all the things that he had been given and all the things that his parents had done for him to make his life better than they had for in their lives.
And I think that's why, again, people who have been reading you, Randy, were excited about this. But then you have people like we see on Amazon here, Raymond Benson, who's a first-time reader of yours. Um, Talk to us about that experience, because I'm sure, of course, with Cheeseland, you knew, people got to explore you for the first time. You knew that. But what's it like for you now with this book to have new readers find you and enjoy your work?
Well, I mean, part of it is that it's been a while since I last had a novel out. My last book was a work of nonfiction that I co-wrote with another author, and so there was a fairly good big gap in between my novels, and so you know, I've I've been introduced to a lot more people. The world has changed dramatically in that time. The way that you can put a book out into the world now compared to the last time that I wrote a novel is totally different. We didn't have Amazon Live when
Yeah.
when I last met you. You know, these kind of things all are different, and I think that opens up a lot more doors in terms of who you're writing to, um, people that you're writing to. It's funny that you mentioned Raymond Benson, because I actually had just met him. I actually met him many, many years ago, but I didn't really know him at the time. And I just recently re-met him, and um, and so we became Facebook friends. So he is the he was one time the author of the James Bond series. So he's had a lot of success, and he emailed me right before he posted that review um, to Amazon and said how much he enjoyed my book. And I go, holy cow, like this guy is a James Bond novelist who is telling me that he really enjoyed my story, and those kind of things just, they just like, uh, you know, it makes all of this for me worthwhile when you hear people like that you just don't expect to even like, be taking the time to read your book, but to not only take the time to read your book, but to
Yeah.
write reviews
Yeah.
about it, and then send a personal email to you about it. Like, and these are people that I don't really know all that well. I wouldn't call them great friends by any stretch. I've met them here and there over the past, because as you know, I'm involved in the Chicago literary community on a fairly large scale. So I've met a lot of people over the years. But there's a lot of people that you meet that you're just associates to some degree, I guess.
Right.
You're not really close friends, and to have people like that, you know, show that some excitement about the book is just humbling. I mean, I'm like, I was really kind of stunned when he, wrote that to me.
Awesome. That's the last thing I want to talk to you about here, Randy, and that is about your support of the literary community. And I think it has been reciprocated to you as well. Um, how has that benefited you, especially over the past few years? It's been interesting for me. I was still, of course, doing the radio show during the pandemic. I wasn't doing any traveling the past few years. I literally left my home state of Mississippi for the first time in 3 years this month. But readers were so excited to still have new books coming out in the past few years, to be able to have virtual events. What has that community been like for you, especially seeing how the world has changed over the past few years?
Um, you know, so yeah, I mean, I think for everybody, the pandemic was a challenge for
Mm-hmm.
obvious reasons. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you were the world that you knew was completely changed. Um, and for me, as you know, I've been the president of the Chicago Writers Association. I actually was one of the original founders of it for the last 15 years, and I've been the president ever since. And so I was used to being very active in the literary community, and
Mm-hmm.
always, attending functions throughout all over the place. We have an annual conference, which we actually just had just last weekend. But things like that were stopped for 2 years. We had
Mm-hmm.
uh, our third conference, or no, it was our second conference. Yeah, I think it was our second conference, was scheduled for March of 2020, which we all know what happened in March of 2020, and that
Right.
didn't happen. And so we had to wait for 3 years before we could have another live event like that. And so to be able to do those kinds of things again, and to actually, meet people in person, and not just by Zoom or, or by, social media, or all things like that. I think I, I don't know about how you feel about that, but like for me to actually meet somebody in person is a whole different, it just has, to me, it brings a lot more closeness
Yeah.
than being able to, talk by, video or
Right.
social media. It just doesn't have the same feeling to me. And like, to have all that back makes a lot of difference. And, like I wrote this novel, during a pandemic. And I write about that in the footnotes, about how it became a bit of a challenge for me, because my the place that used to be my escape for writing was this place right here that you're seeing me in right now. This was my escape, but it also now became the place that was my workplace.
Yeah.
And so like it didn't feel like an escape anymore.
Mm.
But then I came to the realization that, the writing that I do, for my novels is different than the writing that I do for my work. And that I could escape to those places that I'm writing about. And so, like, um, with the writing about Cuba allowed me to go back to Cuba, even though I couldn't visit there anymore.
Right.
And to bring all that back was, it brought a lot of joy that I was missing for that, over 2 year period.
Well, well, it's great to be able to have you providing escape for us again, Randy, with a book like Havana Hangover. Definitely invite our audience to go ahead and get the Kindle edition. You guys can see it there for $4.99. Also, while you're there, make sure you guys pick up Lost in the Ivy. You guys can see it there for $3.99. We have it featured there in the carousel. And then, of course, the book that started it all, Cheeseland, is $2.99. But again, I have my paperback here as well. I didn't want to pull out my Lost in the Ivy paperback. Mine's kind of marked up where I was taking notes in it already. But definitely our audience can be able to get the Kindle editions of all of Randy's books there. Randy, congratulations to you again on the new book. Really appreciate it. Once you
Thank you.
guys, of course, have read the book, make sure you guys let Randy know what you think about it. And Randy, how can they stay connected with you?
So you can find me on my website, randyrichandson.co. And or you can contact me through the Chicago Writers Association too. The info, our website is chicagorights.org, and you can also contact me by email at info@chicagorights.org. Those emails go directly towards me. And I did also want to mention, like, the paperback for Havana Hangover is coming out on April 18th. So
Oh, nice.
if you prefer the hardback cover versus the digital book, like I do at least, I actually like reading books digitally, but I like holding books and getting them signed. That'll be out on April 18th.
Awesome. Well, it gives us something to look forward to for sure. Randy, again, congratulations to you. So glad we got a chance to catch up again. I'm looking forward to our next chat together.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And good luck to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Cyrus Webb Presents here on Amazon Live. Again, make sure you guys do pick up your copy of books by Randy Richardson. Again, you can see them in the carousel, either here on this side or down below. Also, of course, make sure you guys do stay connected with Randy, depending on what platform you guys are joining us on as well. Until next time, I'm Cyrus Webb saying thank you all so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.